Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My summer holidays are more or less over. I wasn't actually planning on starting the live stream this early, but I thought, why not? There's lots to talk about, and I'm sure you'll be keen to join in some chat as well. Let me get the comments ready. Yeah, so do fire in questions. I mean, all sorts of things going on. I mean, we had the general election. I actually went on holiday on general election day. We were planning to have gone earlier, but then Rishi Sunak announced the general election in the Scottish school holidays. So we had to move our family holiday back a few days, but it ended up that we left on election day. So normally there was quite a few things you do after election day, talk about the results and that sort of thing. But that was foreshortened or eliminated in this case because we were off on holiday and we went to Yeovil. We do house swaps, went down to Yeovil in Somerset. That was very nice. Then last week we were at Refuel, the Christian conference in the northeast of Scotland. We had a tent there. I'll talk about that a little bit later. That was very good. But where do we start today? Why don't we start with, I suppose, the story of the hour. Really, this has received a lot of attention among our sort of circles. I would suggest the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. I made a video about it. It's on about 11,000 views. If you haven't seen that, go and have a look at that. I give my response to it. I don't want to recover that ground. In a sense, it's quite shocking. But the startling thing is that French government officials, one after another, saw what was planned and said, yep, go ahead with that. That'll be fine. That'll be fine. I've seen quite a few church leaders have responded to it, saying it's completely out of order and objecting to the mockery of the Last Supper. All the statements I've heard from church leaders, they've been really good. They haven't been flying off the handle. They haven't been intemperate, but they've made their feelings quite plain. Donald Trump said he thought was it disgraceful? Was that the word he used? Now, and I've also heard some people say that the people who are complaining about it are far right. I mean, how about that then? I mean, just really bizarre. So people who complain about, a scene mocking a central story from the Christian story, and also promotes threesome, promotes polyamory, also promotes abortion as well, presents as a hero a woman who campaigned for abortion. Just politicized and then drag everywhere. All the men, virtually all the men you see are feminized as well. And so really dreadful stuff. But then apparently some people are saying the only people who object to this are sort of far right. With the BBC, etc., they'll have nothing to say about it at all. Their commentators on it just read from the script, followed the official line. They didn't have anything original to say about it at all. With the BBC, what would it take to put on screen to make their commentator say, whoa, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Is this really appropriate? So it was the Olympics. Now, I suppose a little backstory from it was I made the video. I screenshot clips from the BBC coverage of it, published the video, but no sooner was it published that there was an objection. Basically, the Olympic, whatever it's called, Olympic Committee, whatever they're called, they objected to it on copyright grounds. So they said my video was breaking their copyright rules, which is nonsense. It wasn't. You're allowed to use short excerpts from things for the purposes of criticism and review. And my video was obviously for the purposes of criticism and review. The way copyright law works, roughly, as far as I understand it, if you're putting something that's going to make people think, oh, I've seen that now, I didn't need to go and watch the original, then that's where copyright comes into play. So if I used it to make a video, the 10 best Olympic opening ceremonies, then that will be breaking copyright because it's using it for its original purpose to impress people with what's going on. But if it's for criticism or review, you are allowed to use it. So what could I do? I didn't even bother appealing to YouTube. You appeal to YouTube, and then within about 10 minutes, you get an automated reply that says, we've looked into the case again, and no, we're sticking to our decision. And so what you do then, I would have to take the Olympic Committee to court over it. It was obviously not going to happen. So that was ridiculous. So I had to change the video footage for still pictures, but still the message got across. So I think, it does seem to have stirred quite a bit of a backlash. I would imagine that the French government, other top Olympic officials will be thinking, we made a mistake there. And that's good. let's hope that they are thinking that. Or maybe they're not. Maybe they're thinking, well, of course, we're going to have these far-right nutters objecting, but this is the way we, do good in the world. We promote these values. We're inclusive or whatever. Who knows what's going on behind the scene? Right, we'll come to that in a minute. We'll come to that a little bit later. Right, only now, since the Olympic ceremony, do I believe that Christianity is the most persecuted religion. Christianity is the most persecuted religion in the world by a long, long way. Generally, wherever you've got religions alongside each other, there can be trouble. And there are instances where Christians will mistreat Muslims, Christians will mistreat Hindus, vice versa. It goes in any direction. But the big picture is it tends to be Muslim majority countries where people of other faiths, particularly Christians, face persecution. That's the big picture. Roughly speaking, generally North Korea is regarded as the most hostile to Christians and equally well to people of any religion. It's sort of harshly, totalitarianly atheist. So North Korea is number one. But then the next few in line for the most persecuting countries are generally Muslim majority countries. So that's the big picture. I say it happens in all directions, but the big picture is tends to be Muslim majority persecuting Muslim majority countries persecuting Christians. Sometimes a bit of discussion. People say, "Oh, what we face in Scotland or in the UK, that's not really persecution. It's not serious enough. If you call that persecution, you've been a bit of a wimp. You've been a bit melodramatic." Well, I would disagree with that. If you're talking about someone losing their job, and then that justifies the label persecution. If you heard about something going on in another country and they said all the Christians have lost their jobs, they've all been sacked by the government and they've got no jobs anymore, I don't think anyone will say, "Oh, come on, lighten up. That's not really persecution." Now, the fact here it only happens to sort of isolated individuals doesn't change it. It's from their experience, that's persecution. So I tend to disagree with people who say, "Oh, it's not really persecution here. You need to man up a bit. You've been a bit melodramatic." I tend to disagree. John, yes, I've heard about a bit of sponsorship being withdrawn from the Olympics. That's great. Yeah, more the better. And I think I say Trump said something. I mean, what about Keir Starmer? What about John Swinney? I mean, John Swinney hasn't really got any status to make any comment, but Keir Starmer has. Could not have made some sort of comment. I think there should have been comments from around the world to the French government saying, "What are you doing? That was not right," and letting them know. Put me off watching the actual Olympics. Well, yeah, it didn't need to do that with me. I'm not really into watching the Olympics in any case. If I sit and watch a sport, I can get into watching any sport and I quite enjoy it. But I don't watch television at all, apart from watching motor racing, apart from watching the Grand Prix. That's my sole television viewing. So I don't really watch anything by accident. So I won't be seeing anything of the Olympics this year. Yeah, so let's hope that they learn their lesson. But I suppose on the plus side, it's been a really stark illustration of the clash of values that we're facing. If you look at some of the other opening ceremonies, people have been putting up clips from the Russia Winter Olympics, where you've got sort of ballet dancers who are very elegant and traditional, and it looks great. Compare that to the junk you get from France. Well, again, that's just playing into Putin's hands, isn't it? Putin's saying, "Look at these Western democracies. What a degenerate lot they are. Whereas we in Mother Russia, we've got much better values. We're much more traditional, more solid society. We don't want to be like them, do we?" And most Russians probably think, "No, we don't. We definitely don't." Yeah, so it's an own goal. It's an own goal. Right. Let's have a look what we've got next. I made another video as well. I thought I'd make a couple of videos about things not particularly Scottish specific, but the sort of things people have been thinking about recently. This video is coming out tomorrow, and it's 4:30, I think, on YouTube. Look what the cat lady's dragged in. Because Kamala Harris was called the cat lady by the vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance, which is totally out of order, using an sort of insulting phrase like that. So I'll talk about that in the video. But talk about the fact that Kamala Harris, one of the first stops on her presidential campaign was to be on a drag show. And that wasn't just to reach a big audience. That's to align herself with the values, because drag is basically the PR movement it's the entertainment wing of the LGBT movement. And that's where she wanted to be right at the beginning. The rest of the campaign, I mean, her campaign is going to be dominated by abortion as well. Anyway, I won't steal my own thunder, and that video is coming out tomorrow. Right, what else has been going on? Yeah, so up at Refuel, we had our little conference, our mini conference, as we called it. Philip Tanzer told this story, which is always, it develops. I've heard him tell the story a few times, but obviously more chapters get added to him. I don't think I've heard him tell it since he's had children, and maybe not even since he's been married. So yeah, that was great to hear his journey from a gay lifestyle, sex industry, porn work, etc., to now family and fatherhood. It was great to hear that, and well done, Phil, for being willing to tell it. And the reason we're telling that story, of course, is that if someone going through that sort of journey were to say, I'd like some help, I'd like to talk to someone, a bit of counselling, a bit of support, maybe a bit of spiritual support, the Scottish government would say, nope, that can't be allowed. Anyone who helps you would be a criminal. Similarly, the UK Labour government is saying exactly the same thing. Now, it's interesting what's happening, because the Scottish government have put forward a bill to ban conversion therapy. In other words, trying to help someone who wants to change their gender identity or change their sexuality, trying to help them on that journey. That would be criminalised. And the Scottish version also banned trying to help someone suppress their sexuality. In other words, if you're trying to help someone to be celibate, someone to not have sex, remember, this person could be heterosexual or homosexual, that would be a crime. I mean, crazy, extreme law. Now, the Scottish government is now making noises. They haven't said this officially, but it's making noises that they're thinking of saying, well, let's forget our law. Let's just go with what Labour does UK-wide. And to be fair to the SNP, that is what they said years ago. They said, we're going to see what the UK government does, and then if we're not happy with it, we'll do something on our own. Now, the UK Conservative government, for years and years, they've had in their election manifestos, they've said, we are going to introduce a conversion therapy ban. We are. But in the end, they didn't. Because the UK Conservative government became very slightly more conservative in its dying days. So they didn't actually bring in a conversion therapy ban, but Labour most definitely will. And it will include transgender. I would guess Labour's one won't be quite as bad as the SNP's, because it won't include this suppress part. It would just be about changing. But we'll see. We'll see what they come up with. But if Labour's is seen to be inadequate, the Scottish government still might say, oh, well, we're going to do ours in any case. But one way or another, it's coming. And I always say to people, why is it coming? It's coming because every politician, every MSP in the Scottish Parliament was elected on a manifesto of introducing a conversion therapy ban. So once you elect 129 out of 129 MSPs on a manifesto of introducing a conversion therapy ban, there is going to be a conversion therapy ban. It's as simple as that. So we will wait to see how that develops. Right, that's a little picture of us at the conference we had at Refuel. That's our little tent we had, and Mary, my wife, as well. And thanks to people who came and helped as well, Danny and Karen in particular. And Neil was around as well. So that was good. All right, how about that? That's going back a few weeks now. But I thought I'd just mention this. I thought this was absolutely appalling. The national so-called newspaper had that front cover, bottom left there. Time for revenge. It was basically hoping Spain are going to beat England. The text of it was terrible, but the image was a Spanish footballer sort of kicking a fat English person. But again, you think, how can that get through an editor, a sub-editor, whatever process they have? They all saw that and thought, no, that's fine. Let's publish that. If that had been about, say, Pakistanis in Scotland, Police Scotland would have been on that like a shot. That would have been talked about in the Parliament. Probably would have been seen as stirring up hatred. Person might well have been prosecuted. There would have been absolute outcry. So that's the national newspaper showing its values. Now, the national newspaper hates the family party. They've run hit pieces on us from time to time. And what the result of those hit pieces is, well, not many people read the national newspaper. That doesn't make much difference. But the big influence they have is then they get reproduced on Wikipedia, and then they're referenced. And as far as Wikipedia is concerned, I was in a newspaper, so it must be true. It was in the National. Okay, that unbiased, reliable source of information, the National, I don't think. But the National newspaper did apologize for that, as the French Olympic Committee apologized for the opening ceremony as well. The Olympic apology wasn't sincere at all. They basically said, we're sorry if you're so sensitive that you got upset about it. They didn't actually admit they'd done anything wrong. The National newspaper's apology, it was a proper apology. They did say, we were wrong to do this. But let's hope they'll learn the lesson, because they've done the same thing time and time again. And it's an interesting insight into an element, not the whole lot by any means, but an element in the Scottish nationalist movement. So that was an interesting little incident. 2012 London Olympics, homosexual element for the opening ceremony. Not surprised. Yeah, I think that's out of order as well. Yep, that is. So, British values, contemporary British values, what would you expect? Probably not much different. That's an interesting question. So when the buffer zone legislation comes into force, which nobody knows when it is yet, I understand it could be within a short number of weeks, but it could be longer. It's possible the police will look at it and say, we can't make head and tail of this. So give us a few months to try and understand what to do, to train our officers. So there might be a delay with that. There are pro-life vigils in Glasgow outside, I think, 3 abortion clinics, and they take place every week through the whole year. And I would imagine, I'm not saying for sure, but I would imagine that people will be continuing with those as usual in some cases. And so the ball will be in the police's court, and we will see what happens there. So we're into the unknown there. Let's have a look. Right. Good morning, Mr. or Mrs. Jest. I've only just discovered and subscribed to the Scottish Family Party. I wish the party existed in England, where I live. How many people have said that during the election campaign? We've had an awful lot of people making exactly the same comment. I suppose our response is, we will be happy to create, support, expand, to operate in England if there was a core of people willing to take that on. We almost had a Welsh family party a little while ago. There was a little group of people in Wales, but at the end of the day, if you're going to take on running the English family party, it's got to be a pretty committed group of people. The group of people in Wales, at the end of the day, didn't happen. But yep, if there's a group of people who are interested in that, we'll be very interested in supporting people doing that. As I say, there's been a lot of people who have said that during the election campaign. So, right, a couple of things coming up if you happen to be interested in this sort of thing. The Perth show, we've got a stall there. The Berwickshire County show, that's near to Duns. We've got a stall there. That's on Saturday. 10th of August, the Orkney County show. If you're up there, do come along and say hello, or even come along and help out if you've got a few minutes. And with the Orkney show last year, we had a protester. Someone came along, a woman came along dressed in sort of Handmaid's Tale garb. I don't know why. I mean, the Scottish Family Party is the party in Scotland that opposes surrogacy. So why she thinks the Handmaid's Tale garb made any sense, I don't know. Anyway, so apparently she stood there for a long, long time during the day, trying to encourage people to not engage with the Scottish Family Party stall. But what she achieved actually was attracting attention to it. And it probably helped, actually. It was our unique selling point at the Orkney County show. So, that's another point as well. It's been very common. A lot of people saying they wish they could have voted for the Family Party, but we didn't have a candidate. 2 replies for that. If we had more money, we could have more candidates. So join the party or become a regular donor. That will help us. The other thing I say to people as well, if we didn't have a candidate in your area, well, vote for yourself next time. Be our candidate. You can vote for yourself. And a few people have become candidates through that sort of conversation. Well, I'll curse you late. Okay, well, forgive you just this once, but I could try harder next time. That would be good. Right, little update here. You might remember our live stream just before the election, we highlighted sections from a book. This is the book here. And it was a book sitting with pride of place on display in the school library at Kinloch Burvey High School, where John Naples Campbell is the head teacher. John Naples Campbell is a drag performer, makes pictures of himself dressing up as women. He's the head teacher of a school. The school is bedecked with LGBT flags, etc. And the contents of this book is appalling. This is maybe the worst bit. It's talking about, you might remember, we might consider sexual orientation in relation to other dimensions, such as preferences for certain, and then going down a certain species. Right. Okay. I mean, how much more deranged and degenerate can we get? So this is a book in a school. So some local parents pointed out to him that they weren't very happy with this. Now, I also contacted him and said, if you don't remove this book, I'm going to make a complaint about you to the General Teaching Council of Scotland and to Highlands Council. And to cut a long story short, that seems to be that the book's been moved to the 15 plus area of the library. So it's been taken off from where it was on display for the whole high school audience, which is age 10 and 11 upwards, and it's now in the 15 plus section. Right, as far as I'm concerned, only promoting bestiality to children over 15 isn't really an adequate response. So I'm just going to clarify that. Then I'm going to launch complaints about him, and we'll see what happens. He managed to get my latest video taken. He always complains to YouTube when I put up a video about him, even though all I'm doing is using material that he's published and other factually accurate information. So we'll see what happens with that. Watch this space. Right, let's have a look what we've got next. I mean, this was a story from a while ago. Obviously, in Scotland, the police are completely politicized, but to actually be paying officers to go to pride marches, I mean, that's just remarkable, isn't it? So, from my point of view, they take money from my wages in tax, and they spend it to pay police officers to go and demonstrate that they disagree with my personal convictions. That's welcome to Scotland. Now, someone mentioned this earlier on. Someone said that there is sort of attack on the mosque in Southport or something like that. Oh, right, okay. Okay, I wasn't aware of that. But certainly this sort of issue is hotting up in Britain. And it's a very delicate issue. So I'm going to say a few things about it here. I've got some other shots to bring in. Let's start with this one. So this is the stabber in Southport, and the BBC says was born in Cardiff to Rwandan parents, moved to Southport in 2013, and as is normal with these things, then their neighbours say they were normal sort of people. Now, what happens here is you've got a significant body of opinion who's very frustrated with the impact of particularly illegal immigrants, maybe legal immigrants as well, in particular with regard to crime. And you get people like Tommy Robertson, whose mission is to find bad news stories about immigrants. And there's lots of other social media channels like this. So what they do is they feed their audience a continual diet of bad news stories about immigrants. Now, each of those stories might be individually true, but there's a problem with that method. I knew someone once who was the Scottish secretary or spokesman, Scottish spokesman for the National Secular Society. And what he spent his time doing was finding bad news stories about religious people. He would scour the world for a story about a religious person doing something bad. And that would be his output. He would write to the newspaper again and again and again, bad news story about religious people. Now, you could do that. You could pick any sort of people. You could pick ginger-haired people, and you could just publish a string of stories about bad things ginger-haired people have done. And through doing that, you'll turn your audience against that type of person. Unless the audience member is very, very alert and realizes what's going on, they're likely to stir up hostility against that group. Now, it may be, in some cases, that maybe a certain type of person is disproportionately responsible, for example, for crime. Now, in the UK, do we know that? If we look at the prison population, it would appear to indicate some racial minorities are overrepresented in prison. When it comes to actual crimes and convictions, I think race information or immigration status is deliberately kept out of the public domain. They deliberately don't record it and don't publish it because they don't want people to be able to assess things from that point of view. People on the left of politics, they want everything breaking down by gender, sexuality, wealth, as well. Is it poor people? Is it rich people? When it comes to how much people earn, they very definitely are interested in race. Absolutely, that race is a crucial element. When it comes to committing crimes, they don't want to hear anything about race at all. Now, I think it's likely, for a variety of reasons, that there's a disproportionate amount of crime committed by recent immigrants. That's likely to be true, isn't it? Just from the point of view of their personal situations, particularly if you're a legal immigrant, you've committed a crime already in coming here. Your legal employment opportunities might be quite limited, so criminal activity is probably likely. So there's a busy tension brewing here. So when this information is published, there'll be a lot of people who are sort of hoping, well, I was going to say almost hoping, they are actually hoping that the person who's committed the crime, the ideal for them would be there was a Muslim who arrived on a boat yesterday coming across the channel. That's what some people would really like. This didn't quite get there. Okay, a son of immigrants working that way instead. But that's a really unhealthy mindset. The way this issue needs to be approached is by actual data from the police and from the courts. So instead of basically deliberately not gathering this data, it should be gathered, and then we can have an intelligent debate about it and a more level-headed debate about it. But I think at the moment, things are pretty tense. Now, again, if a crime's being committed, let's say this person was a Muslim, what's the point of attacking the mosque? That's just like mindless venting of emotion, of anger. Doesn't achieve anything at all. But we need the information to actually tackle these issues properly. Now, I think the other thing that comes up with this, like the Manchester airport incident, where the police officers seem to use disproportionate violence. And I think one of the victims of that, or they're criminals as well, one of the people attacking the police, I think they might have been Muslims. So you end up with a Muslim mob at the police station complaining. Again, that's completely the wrong attitude. We shouldn't be in the mindset of, okay, someone's been mistreated by the police. Are they part of my tribe? Okay, if they're, I don't know, a Muslim, a Christian, a member of the family, or whatever, then we're going to go and protest because that's really bad. If it's someone else, well, we don't really care. So that's a really dangerous path to go down. That's basically when the population of your nation is not united. It's splintered into factions who are interested in defending their own interests. So every issue, if some crime is committed, they don't just say that's a really terrible crime. They want to know which group is the criminal in, which group is the victim in, and then I'll decide if I care about it or not. If the criminal was in my group and the victim was in their group, okay, scroll on. I'm not interested in that one. If the victim was in my group and the criminal was in their group, right, retweet with a comment, we've had enough of this. Something needs to be done. So yeah, very, very delicate area. Genuine problems to be addressed, but some of the people addressing them are inflammatory and take a sort of unintelligent approach to it. Now, I think the next slide's on the same issue, isn't it? Oh, we'll get to that one in a minute. Right, let's go. Remember, so the thing at Manchester Airport, there's quite a bit of video footage has been released. Apparently, there was a dispute about a demand to search a woman wearing a hijab, something like that, and it ended up in an all-out brawl with a couple of young men viciously attacking police officers, viciously attacking them. One of them was injured. I understand that there was some fear that they were going to try and get weapons from the police officers as well. Now, in that sort of situation, I do not mind at all to see the police respond with as much violence as is necessary to protect themselves and to bring these criminals under control. So I'm not quick on the trigger to be saying, police violence or whatever. Whatever it takes in that situation. It did appear, though, from what I can tell in the video, one of the worst, most violent and aggressive criminals. He'd been tasered and he was lying on the ground, incapacitated, it appears. Then the police officer comes and kicks him in the head and stamps on his head. Now, that seemed to me, I couldn't imagine how that could be justified as proportionate or unnecessary degree of violence. I'm not saying that's definite. Maybe I'm not aware of the full picture. If, for example, he had a gun, under him, and he might have turned over and tried to shoot someone, then in that situation, yeah, whatever it takes, kick him in the head, whatever it takes to stop him, potentially killing someone. But that doesn't seem to be the case. So yeah, so tricky situation. But as far as I'm concerned, when I look at that situation, the race or religion of the people involved is of no relevance whatsoever. But Keir Starmer, now UK Prime Minister, what's his opinion? He was right into the Black Lives Matter stuff, wasn't he? Taking the knee, the whole lot. In other words, Keir Starmer believes, the race of the people is very, very important. He's made that by bowing the knee to the Black Lives Matter ideology. So when the victims, when you get a group of Muslims then protesting at the police station, Keir Starmer's response, if he's consistent, should be, yeah, that's quite right. If you're Muslims and a Muslim got a hard time from the police, then you should assume that Muslims are being picked on. That's the philosophy of Black Lives Matter, isn't it? So maybe Keir Starmer's not so keen on that philosophy. Now he's in charge and he's responsible for the police force. Anyway, so after this had happened, after this initial video came out, we had this gem of an interview from Lee Anderson of the Reform Party. I think this interview, what he says here is absolutely terrible. Right, here we go.
Loud and clear from my constituents is that they are fed up with seeing police dancing around rainbows and being nice to people and running off from rioters. They want the police to do their job. And I think these police yesterday should be commended. They should, in fact, I give them a medal. The message I'm getting.
Right, what a stupid things to say. I mean, to make a comment like that at the stage when you don't know the full story, where there's every indication where it seems like what had happened from that particular police officer was out of order. Now, my personal opinion, in that sort of situation where the police have been violently attacked, if a police officer loses their temper and goes over the top, to be honest, I'm quite sympathetic to them. I'm not someone to be thinking, that they need to be put in prison or whatever. I mean, that situation, that's just human nature. So I'm not particularly wanting to be hard on that police officer. But to say he deserves a medal, I mean, that's just a stupid comment. And if you're going to be an MP, if you're going to be making public comments about things in that capacity, you've really got to do better than that. I mean, Lee Anderson was kicked out of the Conservatives, and he should be being kicked out of Reform for making comments like that. All he's appealing to there is a really, how shall I put it? Well, the sort of lowest common denominator response to it. Again, he's appealing to prejudice, basically, as well. They show that, yeah, the video was clipped deliberately. Yes, absolutely. The policeman was actively being attacked. Yes, yes, but he appeared to be incapacitated on the ground by a taser by the time he sort of kicked him in the head. Yeah, but as I watched the full videos, I heard quite a few people saying, "Oh yeah, that you can see why he did that now. It all makes sense." But I watched the videos and thought, well, no, it doesn't really. If someone's apparently incapacitated on the ground, I can't see the reason for going and kicking them in the head and stamping on the head. I say I might be wrong. Maybe I haven't got the full picture. That's the way it appeared to me. I think I have seen the full video. So, but the thing with Lee Anderson now, he's coming in saying he deserves a medal before he could have possibly known what the full picture is. So you see a video of a policeman using you've got a decent chance of killing someone. You're trying to kick them in the head and stamp on the head. So he sees that and just immediately says that policeman needs a medal without any further information. But I think whatever our response is to that, it should be totally independent of what color the participants are or what religion they are, or whatever. That should be totally, totally irrelevant. So the Muslims who go complaining to the police station as Muslims, saying Allah Akbar, in other words, this is a Muslim issue, then that you're wrong. And that's a serious problem for the nation if that's the way people start thinking. Right, on a similar sort of theme, did you see this? And the Daily Mail reported that some sort of Islamic extremist preacher was looking to buy an currently uninhabited Scottish island to turn it into some sort of, well, we'll look at the details in a minute. Right, the BBC is jumping in saying it's not true. If you read the article doesn't seem to say that it's not true. It just seems to say that the people selling the islands are saying, they're not near to concluding a deal with anyone. I mean, this group has been to view the islands. So let's see what the BBC says. So newspaper reports suggested that the remote spot was in the process of being acquired as a homeland for the preacher's Māori Servants Union, which runs military-style training camps in England. Right, the Māori Servants Union, this is a Shia Muslim group. I understand, again, I'm no expert at this, but I understand that one group that they're particularly hostile to is Sunni Muslims. So almost all Muslims in Scotland would not be on the side of this group. They would see this group as potentially quite hostile to them. The Mahdi in Islam is like a sort of messianic figure. So I don't know if they think this preacher is the Mahdi or if they're waiting for the Mahdi to come. I'm not sure. But the BBC reports a controversial Islamic preacher is not in talks to buy a Scottish island, the estate agents have confirmed. Right, the rest of the text didn't seem to back that up. Anyway, Sheikh Yasser al-Habib was reportedly planning to buy Torsa in Argyll to make his own Sharia law-based Islamic homeland. His organisation launched a £3.5 million fundraiser earlier this year using videos thought to have been taken at a viewing after the island went on the market last autumn. Right, okay, so if a bunch of Muslims from a minority branch of Islam want to buy a place, I mean, if it was like, they want to make a monastery, that sort of setup, then, okay, fair enough. But hang on a minute, we're at that first bit. Māori Servants Union, which runs military-style training camps in England. Hang on a minute. Why have we got this group running military-style training camps? I mean, is anyone going to be surprised if this doesn't quite go to plan in the years to come? Let's just look at this image here. So there are some of them. Okay. So its followers prepare for the reappearance of the promised Imam Mahdi. Okay, so they're waiting for the Mahdi to come. Through faith advancing of societies in accordance with the Islamic Rafida values and achieving the Shia civilizational dominance. Right, Shia meaning Shia as in the branch of Islam, as opposed to Sunni, not Sharia. So they want Shia Islam to achieve civilizational dominance, and they're dressed up in military uniforms. Right, why is this ever been allowed to happen anywhere in the UK? I mean, let's forget about buying a Scottish island. Why is this group being allowed to operate at all? I do not know. I mean, just from what's in this article, it's pretty evident that we've got a problem here that needs to be dealt with. So the Conservatives obviously didn't deal with it. What's the chance of Labour dealing with it? Somewhere around zero. Scottish government, well, they'll probably be giving them a grant to set up there. I mean, John Sweeney will be there shaking hands, having his photograph taken before too long. So, yeah, quite a remarkable story there. Import the third world, get third world problems. I think the fact is, if you import individuals, read a book recently about this. If you import individuals, they tend to integrate into the values surrounding them. But the larger groups you import, then the more they'll tend to operate according to their own values within your nation. And that will apply not just for the third world, it will apply for people from anywhere in the world. But there are some parts of the world where the values that are taken for granted are very different, and I would say inferior to the values that we've, the remnant of the good values that we've still got here. So that can be a serious problem. I mean, a classic case of that is I've read that in Britain, decades ago, there was a culture where criminals did not use guns. If you're a criminal and you used a gun, the criminal community would ostracize you. You are a disgrace to the thieves and criminals. And the police didn't have guns either. And that was sort of the deal. And that changed, apparently, through immigration from the West Indies, from the Caribbean, where there was very definitely a culture of guns being used in crime. And that culture came to Britain. And when that culture came to Britain, then the police had to respond to it. So the police became armed. So the other criminals became armed. And Britain lost something that was very valuable. And obviously, countries can gain things as well when groups bring in positive values, but it is a risk and it needs to be talked about openly and considered. Right, what have we got next? Oh, yeah, the UNCRC, Children's Rights Act, was passed by the Scottish Parliament. 129. No one voted against it. Everyone voted for it in the Scottish Parliament. It's actually come into action just recently, July the 16th. Children's rights basically mean undermining parents, undermining adults in general. There's nothing to celebrate about children's rights becoming part of Scots law. It will just result in a state of the erosion of adult authority, and that is bad for children. The proponents of rights think the more authority children have, the more power children have, the happier they'll be, the better they'll be, the more they'll flourish. Not true. Not true. Children need structure, discipline, and authority over them. That's when they flourish. Children's rights pulls in the opposite direction. Now, this is another clip. Just now we've got a Labour government UK-wide as well. What's going to happen with drugs? Well, the Scottish government is always going to be pulling in the decriminalisation direction. The UK government as well will also be pulling in that direction. Now, public opinion might restrain them, the UK government, but it is the direction they will tend to head in. That's their philosophy. And that's just from in Canada, where they've legalized some drugs and the consequences are disastrous, as usual. Well, a couple of more things about the new Labour government. There's the new Minister of State in the Home Office, Diana Johnson. I just pointed out in the tweet there, she is someone who's supported full decriminalisation of abortion, so killing children right up to just before birth for basically any reason. So it's been Labour campaigners that have been pushing for this in the UK Parliament. So now these people are at the heart of government. What are the values of the 400 and however many there are Labour MPs? How many of them agree with her? Probably quite a lot. So I think assisted suicide and full decriminalisation of abortion are quite likely in the UK, maybe more likely in the UK than in Scotland now. We'll see. We'll see how that unfolds. Just that on Extra of the Day, quite like that. Basically, more good dads. I mean, what makes a good dad? I mean, the main thing is being there. So stable family life, that's another way of putting it. Basically would contribute to solving virtually every problem the nation faces. So a huge difference, a huge potential change for the better in people's lives, young people's lives in particular. And it's an area that's completely neglected, more or less, by the UK and the Scottish government. Right, a couple more things before I go to another slide. Right, how about the election results? I haven't talked about that yet, have I? So how did we do in the election? Well, the Family Party, we first stood properly across the country in 2021 Scottish election. We got 0.6% on the list. The next year, we stood in the council elections. We had 84 candidates. We averaged about 1.4%. So it's quite a good step forward. So 0.6, 1.4. Right, this time, a Westminster election is always tough for us because the attention's not on Scotland in the same way. It's not on Scottish issues. But the major problem, the major challenge we had this time was the Reform Party. So I think in the absence of the Reform Party, we would have taken another step forwards to 2 point whatever percent, something between 2 and 3%. Okay, not massive step, but steps forward towards our objectives. But with Reform, well, I think they really hit our vote, and we were 1% overall. I mean, you could say Scottish election we were 0.6, this time we were 1. So, but generally, whenever we put a candidate up, we'll generally get 1% absolute minimum, even if we don't do anything. So that seems like our sort of baseline of support. Now, previously, in a lot of constituencies, there'd be the 5 parties in the Scottish Parliament, then the family parties. So the family party would be the sort of the none of the above one. So if you're someone who's, you don't like the trans stuff, or you're interested in freedom of speech, some people might think, oh, family party, they say some things I agree with. I'll vote for them. But some people supporting the family party, and maybe they weren't pro-life particularly, maybe they didn't really get this pro-marriage thing. They weren't really socially conservatives. So people like that have now got an option that matches their beliefs better, which is reform. And maybe even some people who do agree with us on our core values, they might be pro-life, they might be socially conservative, in other words, maybe they'll think, I'll vote for reform because it's a bigger operation, it's a bigger show, it's a more serious party. I'll vote for them instead. So as a family party, we need to decide what to do about that. We'll have some strategy meetings, and maybe the Reform Party will fade. Nigel Farage might get bored and wander off and do something else instead. Maybe they will merge in some way with the Conservatives. Maybe the Conservatives will get their act together and Reform will just become redundant. Who knows? Who knows how things will unfold? But we're going to, as I say, we're going to have to think about the way we respond to that. I mean, that's politics. Basically, you have competitors. It's as simple as that. Each competitor that comes along, you either merge with them or you try and beat them. It's as simple as that. There's going to be no mergers because the Reform Party is very, very different from the family party. I mean, to take the obvious example, there's pro-life. I would say I can't vote for a party that's going to continue the industrial scale killing of the unborn. The Reform Party is such a party. So there's an absolute chasm between us. But they're making life a bit more difficult for us. But as I say, so we continue to plan and strategize and work out how we're going to take them on. It's a bit frustrating because the Reform Party is maybe a bit bigger now, but until very recently, I mean, it barely existed in Scotland. Last November, we had our conference. We had about 150. Their conference, they had about 50 people there, I understand. We've got our branches around Scotland operating. They haven't really got any of that. We commentate continually on Scottish politics. They don't do anything. They haven't got any Scottish policies. They haven't really got a Scottish leader. They've got someone, I think they call him the deputy chairman or something, who represented them in the media. And to be honest, he wasn't particularly competent, in my humble opinion. Their candidates, 4 of them were stood down because they were absolutely embarrassing, saying outrageous things. So in some ways, it feels like Reform in Scotland, I've done everything wrong, but it doesn't matter because Reform in Scotland is beamed in by GB News. People see Nigel Farage and the National Party on television, read about it in the newspaper, and that's what makes the difference. So say we will work out our response to that, and we'll see how things unfold. Back in 2019, the Brexit Party was flying fairly high, and they got quite a few votes, but then they sort of disappeared. Then they were reborn as Reform, but then they were absolutely nowhere for quite a while. In the 2021 Scottish election, we got 3 times as many votes as Reform. But things have turned around now. But say things can change quickly, so we'll see what happens in the future. Right, interesting comment here. Farage got a huge part of his votes from having the public backing from the Tommy Robinson organization. If he doesn't come through with their values, that will be withdrawn. Right, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I don't think Reform will ever want to associate themselves with Tommy Robinson because that would be too risky. Because even though a lot of what he says might be true, he's also, I mean, quite often it's a bit too keen for a punch-up. Let's put it that way. So do I think he's been mistreated in the legal system and by the police? I think, in some cases, the police have been trying to get him by any excuse to get Tommy Robinson in trouble. On the other hand, do I think he's a good figure to be approaching these delicate issues? Absolutely not, because he's, would I say, stirs up hatred? I would say certainly not a balanced and moderate voice to bring into this delicate situation. Let's put it that way. But for the Reform Party, will that affect that? I'm not sure it will affect them particularly. If Tommy Robinson would say, the Reform Party are not in alignment with our views, well, who would they vote for instead? I don't really see an alternative coming forward, so I'm not sure that's a concern for Reform. It was interesting over the election. People like Miriam Cates, Jacob Rees-Mogg, they were people who, more right-wing views. They could be in Reform. They could fit in Reform quite well. Did that help them in the election? No. Didn't seem to help them in the slightest, which reaffirmed my feeling that really the local candidate doesn't make much difference in an election. Certainly not, for the big parties. Makes very little difference indeed. What happens is people watch the telly, they see the party leader, they've got an impression of the party in general, and they vote for a party. The individual local candidate, I think, doesn't count for much at all. Possibly, sadly. I think it maybe counts more for us because the contact with the candidate is a bigger part of what the person knows about the party. Whereas if you're a Conservative candidate, people have formed an opinion about the Conservatives, and they're going to vote on that basis. With a family party, they might not know much about us. And if they meet the candidate, they seem like a nice person and said some sensible things. That probably makes more of an impact. Right, what else have we got? Oh, this was interesting. Just saw this on X the other day. A percentage of Europeans who support same-sex marriage throughout Europe. So the top there, Netherlands 94%, bottom Bulgaria 17%. But look at some of the others. Italy 69%, France 79%. So in France, 21% of people don't agree with same-sex marriage. Same in Belgium as well. That's quite surprising because the way things are presented, it's as though like European countries, obviously everyone accepts this now. Italy, only 69% of people agree with same-sex marriage. So as far as I'm aware, there's no such thing as same-sex marriage in Italy either. It's never been introduced. I mean, Austria is 65%, Poland 50%, and then the other ones like Latvia, Romania, very low percentages indeed. Where would the UK come in there? I think it comes in, the last I saw, so in the 70s, maybe just into the 80s, somewhere around there. So a significant proportion of people are still holding to traditional social conservative values in these countries. And generally, well, certainly in Britain, they are unrepresented in the political arena. So we want to get into the Scottish Parliament to represent that view among many others. Again, talking about the Reform Party, the Reform Party's line will always be same-sex marriage, homosexual relationships, LGBT. Yeah, we're totally cool with that. We're nice people. Don't accuse us of being bigots. We're just like you. We're right on board with all of this. That's always Nigel Farage's sort of response. That's the Reform Party. And that's Donald Trump as well, I have to say. It's the transgender bit that they'll sometimes say, I'm not too, I've got some objection to that. But the LGBT relationships, they are generally completely on board. All right, did that after the election, just to remind the people. So we had candidates in 16 constituencies. And those constituencies, so the pro-abortion vote, 99%, the pro-life vote, 1%. Okay, and if it hadn't been for us, it would have been pro-abortion vote, 100%, pro-life vote, 0%. We always seem to be, if you want something to change, this is where it needs to change. So long as, virtually every party that gets elected is pro-abortion, then that's the way things will continue. We are a democracy. Yeah, we'll try and get more candidates next time. We shall see. Well, in the Scottish election, we'll cover all 8 regions, so everyone in Scotland will be able to vote for us with their second vote at least. Okay, this is an interesting little snippet. Do you remember our wedding box policy? It sort of apes the baby box, and it's a box or a package of things to give to couples when they get married, and it's just some financial incentives like a honeymoon voucher, some advice, various things, partly to make it clear it's a message saying we think this is a good thing that you're doing, and partly as well because at the moment poorer people tend not to get married, wealthier people tend to. So for poorer people, the cost of a wedding might be prohibitive, so it would help with some of those costs. So part of the reason is, we think it would be a good thing. Another part of the reason is this is the sort of thing, this is the currency of Scottish politics. If you say to someone in the SNP, tell me something good that the SNP's done, they're very likely to say the baby box, because people understand it. It's concrete, it's tangible. It seems like a nice thing to do. Now, part of the thinking when we introduced the wedding box idea was that it would have a positive effect, and also it's the sort of thing people would understand and quite like, and also it's the sort of thing the media would like to report on. And it turned out that way as well. I think it was one of my BBC interviews and some of the media attention as well. People wanted to talk about that. They wanted to put that in their article about the family party, as they've got this idea called the wedding box. And I think that plays well. I think it comes across as a really positive policy, and that's good. Right, glad to be able to register that pro-life vote. Yeah, absolutely. Me too. Now, that just reminded me, you put a comment on earlier on, didn't you, on a video that was quite enlightening. I can't remember what it was now. I remember replying saying, yeah, good point. I hadn't thought of that. Right, well, that's the end of my slides. So I've just got one little video to show to finish off. So the Labour government is getting going. Now, one of the things they've been saying is we hadn't realised what a state the nation's finances were in. In other words, the Conservatives were keeping it secret. Now with the government, we realise there's not as much money as we thought. So basically, we can't do all those things we promised to do. And we're going to have to do some things that we said we wouldn't do. Now, do you believe that? I mean, are the government finances really that opaque? When the Conservatives are saying, well, no, of course they're not. There are various government agencies that publish this data frequently and accurately. So what Labour is talking about, claiming they didn't know the state of the nation's finances, they're saying it's not credible. And I agree with them. It's not credible in the slightest. The Labour Party has become the government, then suddenly found, there's tens of billions of pounds less than we thought there was to play with for our various projects. So there's a bit of an integrity issue there. But then the other thing we've got is they're talking about the pensioners' heating allowance, winter fuel allowance, it's called, isn't it? Let's listen to Keir Starmer in the month before the election.
Yeah, the Prime Minister was apparently drawing up plans to remove the winter fuel allowance from pensioners. His Paymaster General went a step further. He said these are the sorts of things that we need to look at. So will he now rule out taking pensioners' winter fuel payments off them to help fund his £46 billion black hole?
So Keir Starmer there accusing the Conservatives of, you're planning to take away the winter fuel allowance. You heartless, nasty people. Implication, we would never do that. Then Labour get elected. What do? Well, they're taking that away from millions of pensioners. They're making it means tested. So they are taking it away from millions of pensioners. And it brings me again to the issue that surely something needs to be done about the cycle of promising things in election campaigns, then not doing them. There's got to be a system that says if you put a promise in your manifesto, then if you don't do that, then there's some sort of sanction. I don't know, 10 of your MPs have to face a by-election or something. I don't know. There's got to be a real political sanction to deter parties from doing this. But again, just as a matter of integrity. So when he was saying that, having a go at the Conservatives, did he know that actually he could well do the same thing? Or having said that, if you then realize, I've made a mistake, actually we've got to do that, you need to be explicitly apologizing for that. You'll be saying, I know I said this, but I've now realized that I've got to do this. But neither will happen. And this is why faith in politicians is rock bottom, because they appear to show no integrity. Another hot topic the government's been tackling is housing. And, they're talking about building on green belt, etc. I'm not sure about the idea of green belt, to be honest, because they fix it around a city, then that means sort of the city can't grow. Other versions of it, you can have a wedge, say, of green area. So as the city grows, you've still got this wedge of green area radially going through the city. Whereas the green belt, I'm not sure that's the best way of protecting green spaces or ensuring that the green spaces are close to where people live. But anyway, so they're talking about needing to build lots of houses. Obviously, a big part of that need is because of the huge scale of immigration. Like net immigration, which is about 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 people have been added to the population every year, and they need somewhere to live. So that's one issue. The other issue is family breakdown, and that there tend to be fewer people per household. So many families break up or never live together in the first place that we need far more units of accommodation. And again, that's a massive pressure on the housing stock. But the last thing I'd like to say about this is, what about the longer term? The fertility rate is pitiful in Scotland. So whatever your property price is now, they might be going up a little bit, a lot of immigration. In the longer term, though, is it projected that the population is going to start falling? What happens to property prices when the population's falling? Well, they fall as well, pretty dramatically as well, particularly if you're in, some areas will sort of depopulate, I would imagine. So they're building all these extra houses, huge numbers, but surely the projection is they're going to become redundant in the not too distant future. So what's the plan? Is the plan to be continuing absolutely huge immigration in order to maintain the population and just keep doing that forever? Or what? I'm not sure how much intelligent long-term planning is going on in that area. It is difficult to know, but I fear not as much as there should be. All right. Unspectacular results don't matter. Efforts are not in vain. I think part of what we do as the family party as well is we do have a lot of influence on debate, and we raise issues and raise awareness of issues. So I think we have a very important role to play with that. UKIP is an interesting example. When they soldiered away, basically getting some nowhere for a long time, about 20 years was it, before they got anyone elected. And again, their influence was through putting pressure on the other parties. But that was under the UK system, first past the post. In Scotland, it's different because the list system puts us in with a chance of MSPs as a relatively small party. So that is what we aim to do. Right. Thanks, everyone, for your comments, and thanks for tuning in tonight. Do keep an eye open for the video tomorrow. What's it called again? What did the cat... look what the cat lady's dragged in. I think that's going live about 4:30 tomorrow afternoon. So, yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for your comments. And see you next week. Good night.